Hello, welcome to my show. Today I have my good guest and colleague Brandon Kennedy is with me as we discuss an important and very relevant essay on Truth and Lies by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Hello, yes, Adriel, my good colleague. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's begin by breaking down a few important terms within the essay. In philosophical terms, empiricism is defined as the theory that all knowledge derives from sense experiences. So, in other words, what you see is all there is. Another important term is rationalism, which I have come to understand as a philosophy of life that looks at reason as the supreme source of authority for opinion, belief, and conduct. So, in other words, how you think, how you act, and how you function on a daily basis is a direct response of how you reason. Brandon, how have you come to understand non-rationalism based on our understandings of rationalism?
Anti-rationalism is doing something or practicing something that does not seem very logical or does not work within reason. A person mostly goes off something that may seem unreasonable, such as religion, emotion, or even intuition. It's present in a situation where your emotions overcome you or following a religion because of faith, not because of factual understanding.
Oh, okay, that seems to make sense. So let's create a scenario for our audience to understand in which two different types of people react distinctly in a similar situation.
Do you think one could be like charging your credit card, where an anti-rationalist would be spending money for the things that they need now, or at least what they think they need now, and not try to pay their bills off, whereas the rationalist would think more long-term, spend reasonably, perhaps saving, and not over-consuming?
Okay, cool. I see your point.
Adriel, do you see where our points about rationalism and anti-rationalism connect with Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow?
No, please elaborate. Tell me.
I'm reminded of the System 1 and System 2 concepts where the rationalist uses his System 2, who sees more long-term with more complex decision-making, whereas the anti-rationalist is a System 1 thinker and that they must make fast and unconscious decisions that aren't sustainable for the future.
Nietzsche also includes similar themes in his essay.
Oh yes, of course. One perspective while reading Nietzsche's entire On Truth and Lie in a non-moral sense essay is that he's almost calling out all the System 1 people and essentially wagging his finger at them and describing why they're wrong about their understanding of what truth is and what sense of false illusion of truth that they have.
You're definitely onto something, but Nietzsche himself never really proposes a new meaning of what truth is, where he himself is a System 2 thinker by thinking in depth and rationalizing his argument. He never is able to share his ideas of what truth is. He more so seems to explain the situation that our philosophical world has come to. So again, if we relate this to our modern world, but in a more political sense, does anti-rationalism in any way affect our conduct as citizens or leaders?
I definitely think so. My personal real-world example would be how lawmakers create laws about, here in the U.S., how we drive on the right side of the road, and anybody who chooses to break said law will either be seriously injured or dead, or will have to face consequences handed down within the subsections of this law.
That makes sense. In your example about the driver, I see an anti-rationalist, and they would probably function outside our agreed upon rules of reason. He or she would probably not have a logical reason to drive on the correct side, or whatever the case may be, which would of course cause problems, thus being rejected by our rationalist standards, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because in this case it's protecting people from accidents. This is one fictional example of an action that does not fall into the parameters of the truth or reason that we have created for ourselves, which sounds ironic. But the main point I personally am trying to get at is that this form of reason, or this one way to observe and analyze, is only one way to make any sense of what we see as our reality. It is essentially the base of the building that we've built, and all the details, big and small, of the building are the concepts that we have attached to it. The fact that this one way of understanding and development is linear may or may not be a good thing. It of course depends. For a person who is much more creative and an out-of-the-building thinker, this may be limiting, whereas for the intellect, who uses the tool of reason to obtain knowledge, it may seem the most correct.
Adriel, Would you agree that a lot of Nietzsche's points that he makes addresses 1984 concepts about Winston, the party, and the population of Oceania?
Yes, of course, sir. In the book, Winston has this genuine desire for truth, a desire that almost all human beings still crave today. Nietzsche has his own term for this, truth drive, he calls it. And this is why we value others who seem or who we believe to have greater knowledge.
And Nietzsche talks about these laws of truth that we've created, which is mostly like language and hand signals that we use daily in social and political aspects. It's when one person or multiple people start to misinterpret or misuse these hand signals or misuse language, that's when we start to distrust them because it causes us an inconvenience.
What Nietzsche does in this essay is give us a sense of knowledge about what truth is and how we aspire to obtain that truth. This relates most to Winston trying to rebel against O'Brien and the party throughout the book. Winston is trying to obtain something that he knows is beyond his limits, and that, in the book, is the ultimate reality of Oceania. Brandon, if you could take one thing from this discussion, what would it be?
Nietzsche is confusing as hell, but at the same time, a very intelligent man who provides us with fact and fiction about our ideas of understanding of what truth is and what lies are in today's society.
That's true, and I definitely agree. It's really eye-opening to read this paper and to realize that some of these things are true. What I personally would take from this is that we'll never really understand anything thoroughly, but what we can do is take notes on it and attempt to explain them into something. Anything after that, though, we must admit it is something that we've created for ourselves, though it may not satisfy our drive for truth, but it can, in a way, comfort our unsettling thoughts. Brandon, thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts on this topic for me.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Of course, take care.